With any transformation as big as the one we appear to be seeing due to artificial intelligence coming in and basically taking over, there's inevitably an elephant in that room. And no, the elephant isn't job losses. It's not the fear of an evil AI rising up and firing the nukes and wiping out humanity. No, the elephant is really visible, and it's already quite annoyed. That elephant is climate. Artificial intelligence, as we're using it today, is composed of two main phases. The first phase is the training phase. Now, to train something like GPT-5, that's the very latest model of ChatGPT, it probably took 18 months of the dedicated computer power of multiple multi-gigawatt data centers running 7 by 24, grinding through data over and over as they trained the model. Now, the good thing about training is you only have to do it once. Once your model's trained, however, that's when you let everyone use it. And that's known as inferencing. Now, a single person using a single model for inferencing, that doesn't constitute very much power, probably about the same as you'd use with a home PC if you were playing a modern video game on it. But of course, it's not just one person. OpenAI probably has 700 million monthly users, and that number is growing rapidly. So take that energy-hungry PC and multiply it by 1 billion. Soon, 2 billion. Now you start to understand the direction that we're headed as AI becomes a big factor in the future of our climate. G'day, I'm Mark Pesce. The coming next billion seconds will be the most transformative in human history, and the arrival of AI looms as one big reason that will prove true. Over the course of this mini-series, we've done a deep dive. We've delved into the nuts and bolts of artificial intelligence. Is it really that amazing? Is it all so much hype? Is it going to heat the planet up? In our excitement, we're also losing sight of the other meaning of AI, that it's always imperfect. That's the title for this miniseries because as good as it is, and it is far better than it was just 3 years ago, it still has a long way to go. But we need to ask if we actually want to get there, if we can get there sustainably. That's the question on this episode of The Next Billion Seconds. When I want to have a conversation about the climate, good and bad, what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, I turn to my old pal Mick Liubinskas. Now, he's a bit of a legend in Australia's startup community. When I moved here 22 years ago, there were two individuals who were really at the center. It was both him and Ian Gardner, and they both have done the heavy lifting over years to make sure that there's a thriving ecosystem. And these days he runs ClimateSalad, which you can think of as a sort of big umbrella / investing / promoting / knowledge exchange for all of the climate tech startups coming out of Australia. And there's a lot of them. And we recorded an hour-long conversation where we just took apart everything going on in AI and climate and the broader issue of climate generally. You're going to hear us talking a lot about interesting startups and interesting developments. I'll try to put all of those in the show notes on the website. But what you're going to hear really is two people who are trying to make the right decisions. So without further ado, here's our chat.
Hey everybody, it's Mick Liubinskas here from ClimateSalad. As you know, we love talking about anything that can help the world get to a climate positive state. And one of the biggest conversations we've been having over the last couple of months has been this enormous surge in artificial intelligence and the fact that it has an incredibly big impact on the environment negatively, but also can have a big impact positively. Someone I've had about 100 conversations with this is Mark Pesce, and Mark's joining me today to have a bit of a chat so we can, in the next 43 minutes, completely solve all our problems. Mark, great to have you. Thank
you, and we'll do our best.
It's a very, very big topic, and we're gonna, as two seasoned ranters, we're gonna go down some rabbit holes, trip over a few times, meander a lot. But yeah, looking forward to the conversation. And Mark, obviously, you've been on the tools in AI.
Yeah.
And part of the question is, I think, is people are sitting on the outside going, okay, other than GPT rewriting Bohemian Rhapsody for my grandmother's birthday card, like what are the actual tools and fundamentals of AI? Because one of the big questions is, can we actually use AI to make AI more efficient so that it doesn't chew up so much water and energy? But maybe here we are at the end of September. Maybe it'd be great just get a check-in with you, the exponential growth of AI, like where and the trillion-dollar platforms and all the money going into it. Can you give us a snapshot of where are we?
Okay, so I think in terms of the Gartner hype cycle, if people are familiar with that curve, we've kind of sailed off the top of the curve into unexplored regions right now. There is what can only be called stupid money, chasing something, and you can't say it doesn't exist, but it's going to have pretty profound returns. So there's overshoot. That's pretty typical of a new tech thing, right? I saw the overshoot back when the web happened. I saw the overshoot back when the internet happened, right? This is kind of how this stuff works.
Yeah.
So overshoot is not, it's pretty common here. The overshoot that we're seeing now, because it requires so much physical infrastructure, and because that physical infrastructure burns so much electricity, because it's all using late generation semiconductors that are very efficient, but we're talking about a single chip having 100 billion transistors on them, and every one of those transistors is using a small amount of power. You multiply anything by 100 billion, it's a lot. And then you have 100,000 of those inside of a data center or more. We had more than enough data center power 3 years ago, right? We were building them, but now it's kind of, as you point out, it's kind of gone exponential with Meta and Oracle, which is now, Larry Ellison is now the second most valuable person on the planet somehow, because he's got a deal to build $500 billion of data centers with OpenAI and NVIDIA. That's a US project. You see more and more of this build out happening. We do, in fact, the funny thing is that although interest in various kinds of AI is kind of coming and going and waning and all of this, we actually see that the trend for people using it is still increasing. It's rolling out. To sort of step back for a moment, in my own research, which I look at not just as someone who's on the tools, but as someone who's looking at the culture of the people who are using these tools, what we're starting to see is almost what we would call ambient AI use. So if you have either a teenager or maybe someone who's in uni in the house, take a look at whether the ChatGPT window is just open. And they're not in it every minute, but they're in it consistently. They're getting a little help with this or asking a question about this. Sometimes they're using it as a tutor. Sometimes they're using it as a search engine. But it's what we would call ambient usage. And it's very similar to the way people dealt with television 20, 25 years ago. It was just on in the background, and maybe they'd check in on it, but they didn't have to watch it. If you have, as OpenAI wants, say 2 billion of the most affluent people on the planet, all piped into ChatGPT all at once, if that's not really efficient in terms of its use of power to be able to generate a result to a question you're putting to it, times 2 billion people, then we're going to need so much more power and infrastructure to be able to do that, that it is extremely worrying. I mean, already we've seen a move toward revivifying nuclear power, which, maybe in Canada that makes sense. In Australia, it's literally crazy talk because we have so much sunlight. It's just why would you do it? But they are doing that because they have such a demand for power, and no one really wants to build more coal-fired power plants. Even in China, India is about the only place because they really don't have a lot of other infrastructure that really is trying to build this out. But anywhere that you're building a lot of data centers, you need a lot of cooling. Now, there's some interesting innovations in that. And you need huge amounts of power to be able to do that. And So the question then is, if we are going to be doing that, how do we optimize this for efficiency? Now, the good news is that since the very first version of ChatGPT came out, which is just a little under 3 years from now, and oh my God, a lot has happened in 3 years, getting an answer, inferencing an answer is dramatically more efficient. And it's probably somewhere between 100 and 500 times more efficient than it was back then. Yeah. But there's probably 100,000 times more users than there was back then. Yeah. So some of your efficiency is being eaten up on the fact that it's scaling at a level and at a technology level that we've never seen before. So how do we balance this? Now, the great thing is, because the U.S. and China are having this little trade war right now.
Just a touch.
And just a touch. And America's doing everything to make sure that China can't get great NVIDIA chips, right? And China's like, well, it made them really crafty, because it turns out, and I realized this when we saw DeepSeek, which landed in December last year and blew everyone away, it isn't he with the best toys who wins. It's he who can use those toys best. And so DeepSeek was trained and is inferenced for much lower power requirements than, say, OpenAI or Anthropic or Google would use to train a model. And when we talk about AI, we have to sort of separate this, the modern AI, into two stages. We train a model, and training a model takes 6 months of an entire data center, maybe multiple data centers, grunging 24 hours a day, going through the training of the 10 trillion different words and facts and images that get fed into this model, grinding over it again and again and again and again until the models start to put out something that starts to make sense. And then once that's done and it's good enough, then you can let people chat with it. That's inferencing. Now, inferencing is not as power intensive for a single person, but again, you've got to multiply that by the fact that OpenAI has on the order of 500 million users now who are using it some of the time, and so all very quickly run aground in those numbers. So these are the numbers that we're looking at. They're big numbers, they're sudden numbers, and in order to satisfy the market demand, we're now starting to say, well, we're going to have to do things like build power plants and all of these other things to be able to do that. Does that make sense? My feeling is, if you can't do this efficiently, you can have great AI and you'll have a burnt planet, and that is not a good trade-off. And I don't think people are really, they're making some hand-wavy gestures about it, but I don't really think anyone's made that front and center, that in fact efficiency is probably the most important thing. Right now we're getting efficiency gains just because that's happening. But there's no directed effort to really, really make AI as efficient as it could be. I want to actually just see AI not so running in a data center, but running on your smartphone and running on your PC. And I've been doing that since the beginning with some of the models that have come out from Meta and now from Alibaba and from DeepSeek. There's lots of ways of running it relatively efficiently locally. They're not quite as good as the big models, but they will be. And when they are, then do we need those great big data centers?
Yeah, I think so much of this actually depends on how it evolves, and we are even though people like yourself and many others have been working on AI for 20 years, it always seems like it just emerges out of absolute nowhere for the average person. And for in terms of actual practical usage, it's really 3 years ago is when it was like it went from being kind of useless to useful pretty quickly. But we're in the very early days, and what I keep going around in my head and not getting a very good answer on is the interplay between Wright's law, Moore's law, Jevons paradox, just in AI, let alone energy and climate. Because as you said, 3 years in, of course it's not going to be optimized. It's going to be terribly messy. But as you said, every bit of there's Wright's law, which is as we scale it up massively, the cost should come down exponentially. But then also as things become cheaper, Jevons paradox says that everyone uses it more. And then you have Moore's law applied because NVIDIA they were a gaming company, right? They were making gaming processing units and graphic processing units, and and they all kind of lucked onto this thing of like the fact that AI, so they aren't optimizing them, and as you said, data centers they have cared about energy and water because they've needed some, but now they're like to put a data center, like your very first conversation is power and water, like, and hopefully as regulation goes up because of everyone understanding the climate problems, they have to do that with a view of, not like Meta has really, which is nuclear. And again, I agree, it doesn't make sense in Australia, but finding an old nuclear power plant, turning it on to run your power center is better than running 10 coal-fired power plants, but like marginally so. So we're just in the middle of these two mega trends, like totally running into each other, and you've got like so many variables at play, and we're kind of hoping that a good outcome happens, because certainly there's no putting AI back and going, whoa, well, let's just grow slowly over 20 years. It's going to grow at even faster rates, because you think about when the iPhone first came out, the platform, the app development platform was like touched on, and then 5 years later it was like 10 times bigger than the iPhone. The same thing's going to happen. Like I was telling someone last night, we're at the filmed plays stage of AI. Like when movies first came out, they used to film plays. I think we're at the just barely using it as it is. We haven't built a platform for it. As you said, it's not on phones, so it has to get more efficient really fast. Otherwise, it's actually going to run out of energy and water. Like it's probably going to cause a crisis much faster. And then people, all this money, they're almost going to be forced to solve it. So maybe even like AI's growth is possibly the best thing for climate change, because the 2050 year goal of avoiding 2 degrees doesn't compute to the average person, but the average billionaire, Larry Ellison's going to be like, I need to roll out data centers. Oh, we need water and we need power. It needs to be really efficient and it needs to be good for the environment. No problems. Like here's $1 billion. Go and fix it.
Yeah. I think you talk about we're going to be running into a climate wall. I'm pretty sure that as soon as people started raising the specter of nuclear, that was a sign that we'd actually already hit the wall, and people were now just groping around for a solution. It is surprising to me, as a proud Australian, the sunniest nation in the world, because the middle of the country is all just a vast desert, that we aren't actually populating some parts of the sunnier parts of this country with data centers, because you can make all of the power there, use all the power there, and you don't have to ship the power anywhere. The only thing you're shipping out is a fiber optic cable, right? So that in terms of the economics of it, it feels like that is a no-brainer. The only thing you have to worry about is that there's some ping delay between various parts of the world, but for Southeast Asia, we're very well placed. Why people aren't taking that path rather than saying we're going to go wake up a 20-year-old decommissioned nuclear reactor, because what could possibly go wrong with that? Right? Yeah. That it feels like in some way.
I love this photo that shows how much solar we need to power the entire world, and you're like, where is it? Yeah, it's just those little red squares. Like it's that
tiny little square in Western Australia, exactly.
And people are like, oh, it's going to be used too much land. You're like, have you seen what fracking does to land?
Well, there's that, and there's also, of course, the beautiful work that's happened, I think, in Western New South Wales, where the sheep are grazing underneath the panels, because it turns out they actually like getting shade during the day, which no one really knew because they never had shade. And now the sheep are all like very happily, and the grass grows well under there because it's not getting too much sunlight. So there's all these different ways of thinking about how renewables work very well with AI if we make those decisions. It feels like the thing that's needed there then is, it's probably not a public-private partnership, but a large enough capital pool to be able to spread the risk around the generation in the same way that, say, a Meta or a Google would spread the risk around a new facility for compute.
So yeah, that's interesting. So that's interesting. This combination of humanity's need to get the world back to being nature positive, and market forces, and that's what it is really interesting that I don't think Mark Zuckerberg's sitting there going, I really, really, really want massive data centers doing AI, but I tell you, they have to be good for the environment. yeah, they're not driven by that. They have to be driven by the other mechanisms. But I think that the view is certainly that solar, like looking at even the Saudi Arabian solar deals, and like it is very clearly the solar and wind are clearly the cheapest source of renewables, and they are still not at full efficiency. Like
Yeah.
we've got room to grow there. So I think coal is definitely on the decline, and I agree. If you had a bunch of nuclear already in place, you wouldn't turn it off. Other than modular nuclear fusion, you're not going to be able to roll it out.
I have to tell you, I had a conversation with a very esteemed lawyer about 2 months ago. It was a lunchtime conversation, and I was like, wow, we really do need new data centers, because she had remarked to me, because she does a lot of work with the investors, that basically the only deal flow she was seeing was AI companies. I was like, well, we're going to need more data centers for all of that. She's like, you're absolutely right. In Victoria, we can co-locate them on gas fracking and burn the gas right there. And she was really excited. And I was like, why wouldn't we use solar for this? And she looked at me, and you could see this kind of calculus going on. Well, she just said, but that won't work. And I was not prepared to kind of lay out the actual economics and the engineering on why that would absolutely work. Because she just turned to me and said, no. Drill, baby, drill. That there is, I think, a broader perception that the only way to get fast energy, that in some ways, climate safe energy is not seen as being as good, as useful, as capable of work. Sure, you can use it at home, but at industrial scale?
Yeah. I get it. Like it's a really complicated thing, and it hasn't been helped by massive money being put into disinformation. Like that's there's no doubt that has happened, and it's like really clear and totally admitted. But and my view is actually that, and what I say to climate tech entrepreneurs is, you have to go and solve it with that in play. Like you are all the social capital of all the people trying to do the best cannot compete with $7 trillion worth of fossil fuel companies who are defending their assets. It's why I said actually that the Australian target, even though some people wanted it to be much more aggressive, I said the more aggressive it is, the more defensive the industry, and the more those people like that say that's going to come at a cost. Whereas what we just need to do is to actually go and create. We need to go and create the products that are better, and they also happen to have to be better for the environment, and that's what solar and wind has done. So I think again, sure, it might be easy to go back to those things that we already know, like coal fire and fracking, but they are diminishing. Like anybody who knows the numbers, like they are absolutely diminishing. They're going backwards. They will not be the solution long term. And we're just in the middle of this mess, and we need to step to the other side. So partly it's having the faith and patience, partly it's pushing when we can.
And there's that beautiful line from Gandhi. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And we're in the then they fight you stage, which means actually we're kind of close to winning. Like it or not, we've already made our choices, and we will be living in an increasingly warming climate for some years to come. Yes, we need to do everything we can to keep that warming to the lowest extent possible in order to save ourselves and all of the rest of the species on this planet. And it feels as though we need to see all of our macroscopic actions, the actions that affect the whole planet, through that lens, that's the lens that allows us to judge whether something is wise or whether it's unwise. And here AI sits in such a category by itself, because if you look at it one way, it's profoundly unwise. If you look at it another way, it's perhaps a tool that can assist us in being wise. How do we make our decisions here? And you can see why people can get so incredibly intense and emotional about this, because some of that's reflecting the loss of agency that we feel with the climate. Some of it's our guilt. Some of it's our understanding that the future is going to be different and wanting to claw that back to a world that was the same. But that's not going to happen. All we can do now is use our best information and our best hopes for the future to guide us through the next billion seconds. The Next Billion Seconds was written and presented by Mark Pesce. Big thanks to Mick Liubinskas for coming on to our show. The Next Billion Seconds is produced by Medium Productive. Our show was mixed by Mark Pesce, executive producer Josh Butt. If you like our show, please remember to follow us on your favorite podcasting app. And if you know someone who might be interested in this topic, please share our show with them. This is Mark Pesce, thanking you for listening.